Arthur was a teenager when his father left the family. They were descendants of Jewish immigrants from Germany, living in the slums of the Bronx and barely making ends meet. In order to feed his family, the guy was forced to leave school and go earn money. However, the American dream was already a thing back in the 1920s, and Arthur was able to bring it to life. Granted, on his way to wealth, he ended up in prison for a year and a half. He learned his lesson, however, and ended up behind bars again. Thus, the son of a poor immigrant became one of the richest and most powerful people in New York. In 1933, he was even recognized as #1 in the entire country. #1 of what, though, was defined by the Department of Justice. He received the ominous title of Public Enemy #1. An influential gangster named the Dutch Schultz managed to bribe the necessary people so as not to go to jail and avoid giving the state so much as a single penny. He managed to cash out and hide his $1 million fortune before dying young, becoming something of a legend. Schultz left behind a hoard that today would be equivalent to about $150 million. How did he do it? Born in the Bronx, Arthur Flegenhimer took the place of his departed father at the head of the family while still in 8th grade. He did the best he could, and for 3 years took any opportunity that was offered to him. But the legal ways of earning a living didn't exactly produce good money. Petty theft in a nightclub taught Arthur how to steal. Before long, he got caught. The 17-year-old boy was sent to prison on Roosevelt Island for a long 17 months. But Flegenhimer turned out to be such an unruly prisoner that he was transferred to a so-called working farm, where all the prisoners there were engaged in hard physical labor. From there he tried to escape, which earned him an additional 2 months. In 1920, 2 important events took place. Arthur was released from prison, and Prohibition was introduced in the United States. When the guy got a job at Schultz Trucking, a business plan quickly came to mind. The trucking company turned out to actually be a beer and whiskey smuggler. At the same time, the pseudonym Dutch Schultz appeared. Arthur's colleagues most likely didn't know that his surname was Deutsch, or German, not Dutch. The guy himself liked the nickname though, and he figured no one would have printed his real name in the newspaper anyway. Soon after, Schultz left the company and started his own business, becoming a partner in an underground club and forming a gang with a friend named Joey No. The 2 accomplices saved up enough money to open their own fleet of trucks. It was expensive to ship illegal alcohol from New Jersey to New York, which worked out favorably for Dutch Schultz. This led to his clients being various establishments throughout New York. The young gangster also dealt quickly with any competition in the market. He turned out to be a decisive, cruel, and ruthless individual. One man who was not afraid of gangsters ended up kidnapped and hung on meat hooks. It's said that afterwards they covered his eyes with tissue infected with gonorrhea. The unfortunate family had to pay a ransom of $35,000 to get him back. After that, no one dared to challenge Schultz's gang, and he became known as the Beer Baron of the Bronx. The Dutchman wanted to expand his holdings to Manhattan, but it was the territory of the Irish Mafia, led by Jack "Legs" Diamond. This was Schultz's first serious conflict with other gangsters. Even back then, it became clear that the young criminal is too impudent even for a mafia. In October of 1928, Diamond's people removed Schultz's friend No. A few weeks later, Kingpin Arnold Rothstein was murdered. The official reason was a gambling debt, but the victim was close to Diamond, so it was, most likely, revenge on the part of the Dutchman. The leader of the Irish Mafia himself was eliminated in 1931, also on the orders of the Dutchman. While Arthur had to wage a turf war, he was simultaneously being stabbed in the back. One of Schultz's gang associates, Vincent Call, demanded that he be made a full partner. The Dutchman politely refused his request. Then Call formed his own gang. It turned out to be a fairly easy task. It was enough to gather some of Schultz's people who were dissatisfied with their leader's policy. The fact is that the Dutchman only paid his employees a fixed salary, while other large gangs received a percentage of profits gained. Call's faction went to war with the Dutchess. The leader of the newly made gang was nicknamed Mad Dog when, during an unsuccessful assassination attempt, his people killed a child. In 1932, as Call was answering a call in a telephone booth, he was shot with a machine gun, and so Schultz won. However, the Mafia soon faced a new problem. In 1933, Prohibition was canceled and the Dutchman now had to look for new sources of income. he decided to switch to lotteries and racketeering. Schultz took up extorting local restaurant owners, and even this he did to an excessive degree. The Dutchman founded the Metropolitan Restaurant and Cafeteria Owners Association, forcing local businessmen to make massive contributions and donations, all of which went straight into the pocket of the mafia, of course. With the help of the legendary accountant Otto BERMAN, who had the ridiculous nickname of Abba Dabba, the Dutchman falsified the results of races and took control of the underground lottery. Otto was a mathematical genius. His schemes brought a lot of money to the mafia. It was rumored that Schultz was paying the accountant $10,000 a week, which today would equal $155,000. In fact, it was Otto, not Al Capone, who first uttered the legendary phrase, "Nothing personal, it's just business." Obviously, the police didn't turn a blind eye to Schultz's cases. Before long, the gangster was charged with tax evasion, and that's when he became public enemy number one. The Dutchman had become one of the richest people in New York. His income was in the millions, and he never paid a penny of it to the state whatsoever. As a result, Schultz made himself a fierce enemy, New York Special Prosecutor Thomas Dewey. Unfortunately, he did not take this seriously. Arthur Flegenhimer was accused twice of tax evasion, and he won the cases in court both times. Granted, a lot of money was being spent on bribing witnesses and judges. Schultz was forced to cut his workers' pay, which they obviously didn't like very much. The runners who rigged results went on strike, and without them the flow of money quickly dried up. Schultz's loyal henchman, Bo Weinberg, sensed Arthur's weakness and turned to New Jersey mob boss Longy Zwillman. Then another well-known mobster, Lucky Luciano, as well as the National Crime Syndicate, joined the case. After Arthur was imprisoned for tax evasion, Weinberg wanted to take control of his gang, while Luciano wanted to divide Schultz's territory among his people. The gangsters came to an agreement, and with the support of Weinberg, Lucky took control of the Dutchman's affairs. But Schultz was eventually acquitted and had no intention of putting up with this state of affairs. The leader of the gang turned to the commission and met with Luciano. He reassured Schultz, explaining that they were just looking after things while he was away, and that the Dutchman would get everything back as soon as the hype died down. Schultz had no other choice but to pretend he believed this. In order to avoid conflict with Lucky, he even adopted the Catholic faith. Having settled things with his colleagues, the Dutchman moved to finish up the issue regarding the persistent Thomas Dewey, who was following Schultz's every move. Knowing this, he began to cash out money from all available accounts and ordered a large, airtight safe for himself. He then put all his fortune in the vault: his money, securities, gold, gems, and jewelry. The contents of the safe were estimated at quite a fantastic amount, anywhere from $5 to $7 million. Together with his bodyguard, he buried a safe somewhere in upstate New York, after which he suggested that the National Crime Syndicate kill Dewey. The mafia understood that the murder of the prosecutor would bring more problems than good, so they unanimously spoke out against it. The Dutchman did not agree with this decision. With an order to spy on Dewey's house, he turned to Murder Incorporated, a group created by the mafia. Information about this immediately reached Luciano. The commission met for an emergency secret meeting, and 6 hours later, they ordered the elimination of Schultz. The Dutchman was shot on the night of October 23, 1935, in a restaurant. He even managed to call an ambulance, but the first car took the other wounded people, who were in worse condition, and so precious time was lost. The doctors had no painkillers, giving the Dutchman brandy instead. The gravely wounded criminal spoke in fragments, referring to the collection of papers and $5 million. The rest of what Schultz said on his deathbed was likely the delirium of a dying man. Some people think that the phrase, "a boy has never wept, nor dashed 1,000 kin," is a code for something. The police were on duty at the bedside of the dying gangster. They had hoped to get at least some information, but instead they only heard, "You can play jacks, and girls do that with a softball and do tricks with it." Perhaps what at first glance seemed like nonsense was actually a code for the initiated. For example, Schultz's lawyer, Dixie Davis, swore he saw a safe filled with money, bonds, and coins. The Dutchman himself told him that he had buried his income away from the hands of the government. There is also a story which claims that there was a map that marked the location of Schultz's treasure. It was compiled by the Dutchman's bodyguard, Lulu Rosenkrantz. Although he promised to keep his mouth shut, he nevertheless spilled the beans to several people. The bodyguard said that he personally buried the mafia wealth in the village of Phoenicia, Ulster County, New York. The safe was under a tree with an X carved into its trunk. Lulu drew a map for one of the Dutchman's henchmen, Marty Crompier. Rosencrantz died, and the map he created was stolen during the assassination attempt on Marty. However, this is not the only story out there. Legendary poker player Nick the Greek claimed to have seen Schultz before his death, and that Schultz gave him a briefcase to keep. The player opened the bag only after the death of the Dutchman, and there was $5 million, which the Greek eventually lost. Until now, many are convinced that somewhere underground lies a treasure worth $155 million. Films are being made and books written about the Dutchman Schultz. Even after all this time, his story is still interesting to many. I'd like to end the story of the legendary gangster with his own words. Mother is the best bet, and don't let Satan draw you too fast. Or how about these? French-Canadian bean soup. Perhaps he really did have encrypted secret information about a large warehouse, and you'll be the one to figure it all out.